So, Mitzvah, I'm going to be away for Chanukah, God willing.
You're going to be away? Warm, I hope? Don't say Minnesota, it's just as cold.
I'm packing my children into the car and we're driving as far south as we can get, and we'll see how far we go.
Beautiful.
Doing a road trip, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, we'll see how far we go.
Charleston or something.
You have no, like, defined...
I have, like, Shabbosim at my brother-in-law and my sister, and the wait, like... But in between, we'll see how far south we can get.
Beautiful.
So if you get to Boca, look me up.
If I get that far, I'll call you, definitely. I'll look you up.
But then you have your mishpacha there.
Yeah.
I'd like to live just like in Carolina or something. Like, I'd like the seasons, just not the minus 29.
Yeah.
How far is Atlanta? It's not that.
Yeah,
It's not that far, but it's farther. Plenty of places. I think it's farther west, though. But anyway. Okay, so considering that, we're going to do a little bit something about Chanukah, and then we'll pick up Gemara, God willing, after the break. And Rabbi Gimel will be here. I don't know if you're going to be in town, but Rabbi Gimel will be here and can learn while we're gone. Okay, so why do we celebrate Chanukah? It seems like a very simple question, given that we all learned nursery rhymes about the Greeks and the small, the mighty Greek army, and the small ragtag guerrilla warfare Jews, Maccabees, who fought against them, and then the miracle of the oil, right? But of course, I just mentioned two major events. One being the war, right? And that there was an army that wanted to destroy the Jewish people, number one. And number two is the miracle of the oil. In fact, the one little bit of oil lasted for 8 days. And that's where the question comes, why we celebrate Hanukkah? Which of these miracles is the primary? Is it both? Is it one or the other? And that's kind of what we're going to look at. And there's a lot of discussion on this. And Rebbe has some commentary on this, but we're looking at the classic sources just to see the general divide, if you will, between the different camps as to how and why we should be celebrating, and actually has halachic application, as we'll see, and how we actually celebrate, without leaving out some of the populim that come later, especially the Rebbe's commentaries, but just looking at the classic kind of texts on what is said about why we celebrate Hanukkah. So of course we start with the Gemara. So it should be noted like this. First of all, the Mishnah, which is the precursor to the Gemara, right? The Mishnah, we all know what the Mishnah is. Compiled by Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. It's a compilation of all the oral tradition from the time of Moshe Rabbeinu to his day. Now, it ominously omits, I think that's the right word, ominously, omits any mention of Hanukkah.
No, there are a few.
There is a mention of Hanukkah. I shouldn't say that correctly.
Not in a second or a para.
I should refrain that. It does mention Hanukkah, but honestly leaves out the laws of Hanukkah. It doesn't say like, okay, now here comes the laws of Hanukkah, like it would say about Purim, right?
So second Megillah, yeah. Purim.
So one could argue that he's only dealing with obligations that are derived from biblical text, but that wouldn't fit, considering that Purim is also post-biblical. Even though the Megillah itself was canonized as part of Tanakh, it isn't strictly a biblical holiday. And yet it has a track date and it has a set of laws. But the Mishnah does not include that. For reasons that we won't get into at the moment, but it's an interesting, fascinating study on why Rabbi Yehuda Nasi chose to omit any direct discussion on the laws of Hanukkah. One could argue that the reason is because there's different readings as to why that is, but there was a book that is largely not less studied today, but it's often quoted in the Gemara, and it's quoted in the Gemara we're about to learn. There's little passages of the Gemara that's on the top here. It's a book called Megillah's Tainus. Megillah's Tainus literally means like a calendar of fasts. Megillah means the Chronicles, but it's like a calendar of fasts. And what it did was, what this book is, it goes through dates on the year, discusses different events that happened on those days, and it says, today XYZ happened, and therefore it's a day appropriate to fast. Next day, XYZ happened, and therefore it's appropriate not to fast on that day because it was something positive happened. Like this, it goes through the whole year. Now, most of these dates are not observed today, and they haven't been observed since the destruction of the Second Temple. But there are some that are observed, most notably Hanukkah. In there it says that these 8 days, because of the event that happened, we don't fast. One cannot fast, and it's celebrated by lighting menorah.
And no eulogies either. Yeah.
No eulogies and different. It's a day of minor celebration. Now that did carry over, obviously, to today. So one could argue that the Rebbe was expecting the reader to already have read Megillas Taanis, because Megillas Taanis was published and written before. Right? Because Megillas Taanis wasn't under the ban against writing down any oral tradition. Right? The oral Torah is not to be written down. And controversially and successfully, the Rebbe did write down the oral law. But Megillas Taanis isn't the oral law. It's just a collection of dates. It's not the oral law in terms of interpretation of Torah. It doesn't have any of that. It's just a collection of events. So it was never as controversial to publish, and therefore it was written right away. Why not? It's just a collection of events that happened, and reminding people, yeah, this is a good day to fast, this is not a good day to fast. And this is a day when you don't eulogize because it's a day of quasi-celebration. So one could argue that Rebbe was expecting the reader to have already known about Megillas Taanis, and therefore to include it. Okay, that's a separate issue. But anyway, the reason why I mention this is because there's discussion on what's the earliest mention scriptural or written mention of the events of Chanukah, and presumably Megillas Taanis is it. Megillas Taanis is a book called Megillas Antiochus. When that was written is a matter of controversy. Rabbi Gaon writes it's written, according to Rabbi Gaon, Megillas Antiochus, which is the story of Antiochus, the story of Chanukah, was written almost right after the event of Chanukah, but others argue that it was written much later.
Or some say it's a combination of both. Some was written initially and then added, modified.
That's it. But the earliest verified text describing the story of Chanukah is this book Megillas Taanis. But even though we're reading it from the Gemara, it actually way predates the Gemara. So it comes from this book called Megillas Taanis, and that's the Gemara right now. So this is in the Gemara of Shabbos, because the Gemara in Shabbos is comparing which candles are best to be lit for Shabbos, and which candles are best to be lit for Chanukah. And then when the Gemara mentions Chanukah, so the Gemara asks, and that's the opening words in the Gemara on top here, my Chanukah. What is Chanukah? You just mentioned this thing called Chanukah. Well, what is that? The Mishnah didn't tell me anything, so what is that? And therefore says the Gemara, the Tanur Rabbanan, for we've learnt. And here now the Gemara quotes this passage in this book called Megillas Taanis. Where here it reads like this, B'chafim b'Kislev, the 25th day of the month of Kislev, right? It's a calendar which goes through dates. And it says, Yom Chanukah. 25th of Kislev begins the days known as Chanukah. Tam Ne'inun, they are eight in total. Dolel Misbeh behind, upon which we do not eulogize, again because the days of minor celebration. V'dolel Sanis behind, and we don't fast on these days. Again, why would someone, just the parenthesis, I didn't mention this, why would someone want to fast randomly? The primary reason is in Megillas Taanis. Taanis Cholom, I'm sorry. If someone felt that he had a dream, not felt, there's a whole program, it's mentioned in Halach and Halcha Shabbos, how exactly you define what a dream that requires a fast is. But if a person had a dream that requires a fast to nullify some bad decree, he would fast the next day, except for the days mentioned in Megillas Taanis when you cannot fast. Okay. So no eulogies because it's a day of minor celebration. No fasting. Now why? Because when the Greeks entered the chamber, the Heichel means sanctuary, the temple, Timu Kolosh Manam Shebeheichel, they spiritually made impure, halachically impure, ritually impure, all the oils that they could find in the sanctuary, when the Beis Hamikdash, and when the kingdom of the house of the Chashmonaim won them, when Nitzchum overpowered them, but they searched, and they couldn't find only one jug of oil that was lying there with the seal of the high priest, therefore indicating that it was undefiled and remained ritually pure. But it didn't have anything other than it only had enough oil to last for 1 day. Nasa b'nes, a miracle occurred, and they lit from that Shmoni Yomim 8 days. Lashon Acheres, the next day, a kavurim, they established it, v'asum, and they made it, Yomim Tovim, holidays, v'halal v'aidah, with halal, with praise and aidah, and thanks, thanksgiving, acknowledgement. Yeah. So the question now becomes, before we get to the next text, is what's missing from the story? The war. No mention of the battle. And even the way in which the Gemara introduces the story, even the way in which the Megillas Taanis introduces the story of the oil, doesn't say there was a war, they won, and then they think it just says, but Kishin Nichtasu, when it happened that the Greeks entered and they defiled, they couldn't find, as if when that whole thing happened that you already know about, which is not important to our story, it's almost like it's just telling you, oh, you know that story about the war? Yeah, okay, so here's why the holiday happened. Because of the oil. No mention of the battle. And only talking about the Greeks entering the temple, not telling us how they even entered there, but only telling us when the Greeks entered the temple, about the story about which you already know, this and this miracle happened about the oil. So therefore Rashi has to address this.
It's not mentioned in the Chabad Siddur.
What's not mentioned in the Chabad Siddur?
When you do Hol HaNisim. But it is in the Ashkenazi Siddur.
Yeah, that's true. But we do say later that we won Zayd biyad Chalosh, Rashoim biyad Tzadikim. Zayd, like we do mention battle in terms of that you put the hands of the majority in the minority.
Right.
But it's not explicit.
The Ashkenazi Siddur says
That's right. We don't have that. That's right. I have to look to see if
practical difference today in the davening.
That's true. I have to look to see if there were comments on that. I know there were comments on this discussion. I have to see if there. But I don't remember. Anyway, but Rashi has to address this issue, which is why is the miracle of the battle? Why is the story of the battle not mentioned in the story of the Gemara? Just go straight to the story of the oil. So how does Rashi answer it? Very cleverly. So look at the next text. It says Rashi. So the big bold words Rashi quotes the Gemara, where the Gemara asks, "My Chanukah, what is Chanukah?" So Rashi redefines the question, and by redefining the question, he answers our problem. It says like this: Al Ezen Nes Kavua. On which miracle was the story of Chanukah established? In other words, if the words "My Chanukah" mean what is the story of Chanukah, then how could you miss out half the story? What is Chanukah? You skip the whole story of the battle? Can't do that. But actually reframes the question and says, no, the Gemara is not asking what is Chanukah. The Gemara expects you to know the story already. The Gemara is asking, on which of the miracles is Chanukah established? And therefore all the Gemara is telling you is the end. Which would mean, if you're reading this way in Rashi, quite clearly, in Rashi's view, why are we celebrating Chanukah? Because of the miracle of the oil. Not because of the miracle of the battle. Hagafakasha. Why is that?
Maybe the battle wasn't a miracle. Is that possible?
That's part of it. What's called a nation v'teva.
As
opposed to the oil, which is a nation.
Historically speaking, it probably was a miracle. Even if you read Josephus' account, it probably was a miracle. But even if it wasn't a direct miracle in terms of like splitting of the sea, but like Purim wasn't either a miracle of splitting of the sea. It was also enclosed in nature, the story of Purim. But the fact that we were so threatened.
That's different. They were threatened with death.
Oh, so we're going to get there. That's what we're going to get to. That's what we're going to get to. But right now the question becomes, at least according to Rashi, it seems like Rashi is framing the Gemara's question in asking what is Chanukah, not what is the story of Chanukah, but which of the miracles
is it based on?
Is the celebration of Chanukah based on? Al Ezen Es Kavua, on which miracle? In other words, that's just Al Ezen Es means there are other miracles, but on which of the miracle are we establishing? Right? You know, these are the questions that some of the later commentaries talk about. Well,
it says we say Nes Gadol Hayasham, right? We don't say Nesim.
Nesim, right? Well, the question
there was one.
So many of the commentators ask, like, what's the problem? Why can't you have a holiday that celebrates more than one miracle? Al Ezen Es Kavua, which miracle did happen? I don't know, on all of them. Like, why does it have to be one?
Right.
And out of all of them, why only the oil one? Why not the other one?
Because then if it's the war, why 8 days? It wouldn't. That's the question.
So there are those that read this Gemara. There are those that read this Gemara Rashi to mean that the fact that we have 1 day celebration makes sense because we survived, just like Purim is 1 day. Why 8 days? So now you want to know 8 days because of that miracle. So Rashi's not negating. Rashi's not negating
the miracle,
the celebrating and giving thanks for the miracle of the surviving. The Gemara / Rashi is only addressing why it lasts for 8 days.
The Purim is 1 day, right?
That's one way of reading the Rashi. Anyway, there's lots of different discussion, but I just as I mentioned, we're focusing on the classic commentaries here. At least in the simple reading of Rashi, it seems like the miracle of Chanukah, the celebration of Chanukah, is specifically for the miracle of the oil.
Well, you could say exactly it would be 1 day for 8 days.
Yeah, the Rashi doesn't say it explicitly, so we're going to leave that out for now.
Something could be implied. That's Rashi's point. That's why 8 days.
It's not.
1 day.
You could read it in, but anyway.
So you read it in two ways, as many of the Rishonim
as I mentioned,
do
yeah.
actually go through it.
Okay, so now let's look at the Rambam. I mentioned, I think yesterday or a few days ago, not yesterday, I wasn't here, but a few days ago we mentioned that the Rambam does not mention history in his book of halachas. Rarely. There are about five or six examples of Avodah Zarah, Kiddushin,
Base Bechira is because of the history.
Base Bechira about burying the
Different places.
the Shlomo Melech built tunnels for the thing.
Even Gibri mentions it as well, the history.
Yeah. Melchus Melech HaMashiach, it talks about the history a little bit. And also by Chanukah. And I think I mentioned then, that the Rebbe understands this to mean because you have to thank Hashem for the miracle. And if you have to thank Hashem for the miracle, you need to know what the miracle is. If you don't know the story of Chanukah, how can you thank Hashem for the miracle if you don't know the story? What are you thanking Him for? So when it comes to Purim, the Rambam doesn't have to tell you the story because you're reading the Megillah. The Megillah tells you the story. But if you just celebrate Chanukah without reading the story, if the Rambam didn't include the story of Chanukah, just told you the laws of how to observe Chanukah, then you would do Chanukah without knowing what the miracle was, because you have no other text to have known it from. So therefore, the Rambam has to put a little bit of the story in. And the Rebbe goes through all the details and breaks down almost every single word in these two halachas that we're about to read, the three halachas I should say, and why it's divided into two halachas and why it's into three, and every word that the Rebbe analyzes here, but we're just going to look at the general text just to get the overview, as I mentioned. Kind of running out of time. But, so it says the Rambam like this. The beginning of the laws of Chanukah, which is like this. The Bayesheni in the second base of Mikdash. When the Greek army, the Greek kingdom established or decreed various decrees on the Jewish people, and they attempted to eradicate their religious practice. And the Greeks did not allow them, the Jewish people in Israel, to involve themselves in Torah, mitzvahs, and the fulfillment of mitzvahs. And they extended their hand, meaning they looted, stole their money, their daughters. They entered into the sanctuary, and they broke down boundaries, like they did terrible things, destroying the place, graffiti and vandalizing. And they spiritually defiled that which was pure.
What it doesn't mention is actually this was not only by the Greeks, but also there were Hellenized Jews who were helping the Greeks.
We're not going to talk about that right now.
But that's also part of the
Elusive shall be Yisrael. We don't need to go into right now.
No, but it's like just put it.
I know, but we're not going to do that now.
Yeah, it's not only it's not one-sided, but
we're not going to go into that now. Okay. The Tzalam Yisrael Moed. But everybody breaks down each and every word, breaking it down. First, it starts off that they broke their religion, and then it says they extended their hand into their money and to their women, as if it started out spiritual, like a religious persecution, and then it extended into physical persecution. Right? First, it describes that they didn't let them do Torah, and then he adds and then they started stealing from their property and taking their daughters and whatever. Okay, they're big mamish breaks down every single word here. But it continues on, and they persecute the Jews very much. And they put much pressure on them until God of our fathers had mercy upon them and delivered them from our hands. This, of course, is referring to the war. There was persecution, and we fought them, and we were delivered. And God saved them. And the house of the Chashmonaim, the Maccabees, overpowered the Greeks, the high priests of the Chashmonaim. And they killed the Greeks. And they were the people through whom Hashem made this miracle of delivering the Jewish people from the hands of the Greeks. And they established a kingdom from the Kohanim, the Chazer Malchus the Israel, and Jewish sovereignty returned to Israel. Right? Because for quite a while, all the kings in Israel were kind of vassal kings under first the Persians, and then first the Persians, and then the Greeks, or the Assyrian Greeks.
They didn't have a king really at all. I mean, it's like a high priest.
Yeah.
They've never called the king. No idea what allowed it.
Yeah, they had leaders, but they had Nisim, yeah. but they were not. They didn't have political autonomy. Right. But with the Chashmonaim, they did. So this is the great miracle. Yeser al Masayim Shana Ad Churban Sheni, and this autonomy lasted for almost more than 200 years until the destruction. Even though towards the end the Romans took over, but they still had a king.
But they had at least a king in name.
Yeah. But for a while it was actual full autonomy. So first the Rambam doesn't mention anything about the oil yet. It's a full halacha describing the history, and what is he describing?
The war.
Miracle of the war. So clearly in the Rambam, unlike Rashi, who wrote, for what miracle is Chanukah established? For the 8 days of the oil. The Rambam's first mention is the story of the battle. So according to the Rambam, clearly The celebration is the battle. Now then he adds number 2. When the Jews overpowered their enemies, and they got rid of them. It was the 25th of Kislev when they finally reached their success. They went into the temple. And they couldn't find any pure oil. While Mikdash in the temple, in the whole Beit Mikdash. Only one jug. They didn't have enough to light for one day Bilvad alone. And they lit the menorah from that one jug. And it lasted 8 days. Until they were able to provide new olive oil. But in turn, they produced pure olive oil. So here, the Rambam already says 2 things. So in the Rambam's view, it's not merely, in other words, how are you want to learn Rashi? Right? Rashi said that the Gemara is asking for which miracle did it establish. And the Gemara goes on to say, the miracle of oil. So let's just assume that Rashi is saying that it's only on the oil, which other opinions clearly state that it is. The Rambam is clearly saying it's 2 things. Halacha number 1, he says it's happening for the battle of the war that we survived, and we got autonomy in Israel, so it's a physical celebration. And then number 2, it goes to the oil. Now then comes the third halacha, and the Rambam writes, because of these 2 factors, the sages of that generation established these 8 days should be which begins on the 25th of Kislev. The Rebbe breaks down mamish every single word, like as I'm reading and remembering different things the Rebbe says here. Why he has to say Shetchilo? Why does he have to say Shetchilasim Chafei? We know that already. The Rebbe goes through all of this. So, but what did they establish? Yemei Simcha v'Halal, days of joy and days of thanksgiving. What's the word that I'm added that the Gemara didn't say? There's a word that I'm said that the Gemara did not say. Simcha.
It mentioned Halal and Hadah.
The Gemara says it's 8 days of praise and thanksgiving, and then I'm adds the word Simcha. What does Simcha mean? When you talk about halacha, what does Simcha mean? Simcha, when you talk about halacha, does not mean dancing. Simcha in halacha means feasting.
Yeah, usually means the time of the basic korban.
Korban. But when you halacha today, when you say Yom Tov, you're required to have simcha. It means to eat meat and eat.
And wash.
So even the Rambam doesn't say that you're required to eat a meal. There are, we're not going to be able to get to the text, but you can look later in the Bach, which is the last text I have on the last page there. We're not going to be able to read it, but you can see there that he quotes, and he says in his opinion that one should add in their meal, even though they're not required to sit down for a whole meal on Chanukah, but one should add a festive element to their meal, and he brings a support to this notion from that word in the Rambam. He said the word simcha. Because joy implies a physical enjoyment. And why would he do that? Because he just finished saying that the miracle, that the celebration is for both the physical salvation and the miracle of the oil. So the miracle of oil, which is not a physical salvation, it's a spiritual salvation. There's thanks and praise, and there's praise and thanksgiving. But if there's also going to be, if we're also celebrating the fact that we delivered physically, then like Purim, which has a physical celebration, there's also going to be a physical celebration here, unless he has the word simcha.
Others argue just the reverse, that they say because Purim was a physical threat and Hanukkah was only
That's correct.
That's why we
That's
don't
correct.
have the obligation, but still say.
But it's still alluded to.
The
That doesn't say it explicitly, but it's alluded to.
Yeah.
Let's just finish and we'll wrap this up in a moment. And then he goes on to say, and besides for joy and praise, which we just described, we also light candles in the evening at the entrance of our home every night to demonstrate the miracle. These days are called Chanukah, and they are forbidden to eulogize and to fast like Purim is. And lighting the Megillah, lighting the candles are a commandment from the sages, just like reading the Megillah. Okay, so we're not going to have to go through all the texts, but I have more texts here, and in which it comes out that there are different opinions. There are those who explicitly state that because Purim, the miracle was directly existential, therefore the celebration is of a physical nature, and thus it's celebration, eating and drinking. Because Chanukah, the miracle is primarily spiritual, right? The threat was assimilation, and the response, and because the threat was assimilation, therefore the miracle that we celebrate is primarily a spiritual miracle, that we were able to light the menorah for 8 days, right? Therefore, the primary celebration is in a spiritual nature, lighting candles, which you are not allowed to enjoy. Right? We say in the you have no permission to use the candles. So it's not about physical enjoyment. Unlike then Shabbos candles, where you're supposed to enjoy it. That's the whole point of the Shabbos candles, that you should enhance your meal. Hanukkah candles you're not allowed to enjoy. It's a spiritual mitzvah. And likewise, how do we celebrate? Halal v'hodah, praise and thanksgiving. Prayer, which is a spiritual celebration, because the miracle was spiritual. So you have, generally speaking, so far, two ways of look. You have the dichotomy between Hanukkah and Purim, right? In which Purim is a physical celebration, a physical threat, physical celebration. Hanukkah, a spiritual threat, spiritual celebration. But then, as you see from the Rambam, there's obviously a hybrid between the two, in which the Rambam says there's also the element of simcha, or joy, which usually implies physical simcha, which, as I mentioned, the Bach uses as a support for this notion that a person should increase in their meal a little bit, even because there's a little physical celebration. But nonetheless, even if you're going to go to view that there is an element of eating and there is an element of physical celebration, one has to. It's only secondary to the primary miracle. First of all, from the Gemara's explicit statement of omitting the whole story of the battle, right? Which is itself, many of the commentators have to deal with this, because the Gemara skips the whole story of the battle, making it clearly that the primary here is the miracle of the spiritual nature, the oil, and yet the Rambam gives a whole story about the battle. So where did Rambam get this idea that this?
To reconcile both.
Sorry?
The Gemara is focusing why 8 days and why candles.
I understand that,
Yeah, so
but that's a pilpul that many of the Mefarshim make. I'm just saying what.
So that's fine, yeah.
I'm just telling you there are commentaries which discuss this issue,
Yeah, of course.
and they are reconciled in various different ways. But the bottom line here is
Even Rambam seems to
that
apply it.
even if, and this is the point we're getting to, even if you're going to have a physical element, a physical celebration to your Hanukkah, and there should be, nonetheless, everybody's going to agree that the physical celebration is only a byproduct of the primary issue, the spiritual one, which goes back to the opening words of the Rambam. Even there's three halachas in the Rambam. The first two describe the history. And halacha number 1 describes the battle, and halacha number 2 describes the oil. Right? Even in the first halacha which describes the battle, how does he describe it? Not that they right away came to threaten us. It says, first they tried to put decrees and tried to ruin our religion. And only then they put their hands into our money and took their daughters. So even when the Rambam describes the miracle of being saved physically, he describes it only as a secondary byproduct of a spiritual essential threat. Right? And therefore, even the physical celebration is the byproduct of the spiritual salvation. Right? Because it started out, in other words, the Lavush describes at length, to the next text we have here, that even if the Jews wanted to Hellenize, which many of them did, they would have been fine.
Yeah.
They would have been completely fine.
They were Hellenized
The
to
Greeks,
work with the Greeks.
sorry?
Sure.
Hellenized, they assimilated.
Sure.
Yeah,
They actually
and many
worked
did,
with
and many did. We're not going to we're not going to speak Yunus and Shal Yisrael. We don't have to.
No,
but
this
the
is
bottom line is
the fact.
that
Josephus
the
thought
Greeks
that.
were okay with the Hellenization of Jews, and they would have nothing going to happen. It's only because the Maccabees decided they don't want to give in. That's why, which explains, by the way, just two final thoughts. It explains why, even though halachically speaking, they could have lit the menorah using impure olive oil. Why? The halacha is that if the majority of Jews are in a state of impurity, then you're allowed to serve in the temple impure. And most of the Jews were impure. Why? Because they were at a battle. And when you're in a battle, you're in touch with corpses. So why do they insist on using pure olive oil? Because that was the whole point. They were being threatened by the Greeks. And the Greeks, why would the Greeks defile, who cares? Why would the Greeks defile oil? Why would they defile oil? Well, what strategy is there? The whole point is we want to show the Jews, this is garbage, this whole spiritual thing. It's a spiritual battle.
Where is your God? Let him come and save me.
And therefore, the Jews specifically said, no, now we're going to win the Greeks, not by winning them physically. We're going to win the Greeks by dafka using a kosher olive oil, even though they're allowed to get away with doing it impure. And therefore the miracle happens there, which explains why God there's a rule that God doesn't do miracles for no reason. Why would God make the oil last for 8 days? Who cares? Luckily speaking, they would have been okay if they lasted for 8 days without it, because they're fine. They're under duress. It's an extreme circumstance where they're all just had a battle. But Hashem wanted to indicate, no, you demonstrated that you're committed spiritually to Torah. I'm going to make a miracle to demonstrate that I accepted that dedication. And therefore, dafka, the celebration, is of a spiritual nature. Only a consequence of that is a physical battle, a physical celebration. Even if you're going to go with that view that the word simcha in the Rambam actually means a physical celebration. And final comment: this is not a cute word. Both on Purim and on Chanukah, we spin things.
What?
We spin things.
Spin. Okay.
You spin a dreidel. This is not a cute word. You spin a dreidel and you spin the gragger.
Actually, the original was with sticks.
Whatever, you spin a gragger.
According to the European minute.
Yeah. So what's the difference? It's a cute word, not a real word.
Yeah.
The dreidel you hold at the top when you spin it, whereas the gragger you hold at the bottom when you spin it. Right. So you hold the Chanukah, this dreidel on the top. It's a spiritual celebration. So you're holding it on top. It's a top down. Spiritual going to the physical. Whereas Purim was physical, that had its effect on the spiritual. Physical existential threat, which threatened the Yiddishkeit. So you're holding it from the bottom. Stop. Cute little part. All right, a wonderful Chanukah. I heard it as a child in school a long time ago. It's a cute part. Anyway, have a wonderful Chanukah and a wonderful day. Enjoy the break. Sorry? I'm leaving in an hour. Yeah. So safe travels.
I should take the Shabbos here or not? Or we don't?
Shabbos free.
Shabbos, thank you. I feel like Chanukah.